This program is sponsored by Cynthia McIntosh.
My name is Cynthia McIntosh, and I welcome you to Nuggets of Truth broadcast, called to encourage the saved and the unsaved to a deeper walk with the Lord. Dear hearts, on today I want to share some nuggets of truth from the story of a man in New Testament times named Saul, who started out on a journey as a non-believer, but at the end of the journey, he was a believer in Christ. You see in this story that I'm about to tell you that Saul was able to make a good decision in a very difficult time in his life. He did something that some people can't do, and that's to make good decisions in bad situations. His situation moved him to do something that he had not planned to do prior to the trip. God's hand of grace for Saul caused him to experience deep, dark moments. Oh yes, deep, dark moments with strangers he had never met prior to this trip. This trip opened him up to what I call a landslide of major considerations that resulted in the movement of the gospel deeper in both the Gentile and Jewish communities of that time. It shook up his whole world. Yes, his painful moment revolutionized. Yes, it revolutionized the movement of the gospel to the least so that they could become the great. The gospel, dear hearts, found a great place of acceptance because of his painful situation, with the great place of resistance by the Jews, for at this time the Jews resisted the man named Jesus, who told them that he was their promised Messiah. Yes, painful moments can bring great change both to you and those around you beyond your time on the earth. As for Saul, he can do it for you. Oh yes, and let me take us deeper to this story where Saul is en route to a city called Damascus. I want to start reading in Acts chapter 9, starting at the first verse in the Message Bible. Listen to this. It said, all this time Saul was breathing down the necks of the master's disciples out for the kill. He went to the chief priest and got arrest warrants to take to the meeting places in Damascus so that if he found, listen to this, if he found anyone there belonging to the way, whether men or women, he could arrest them and bring them to Jerusalem. He set off. And when he got to the outskirts of Damascus, he was suddenly dazed by a blinding flash of light. And as he fell to the ground, he heard a voice, Saul, Saul, why are you out to get me? He said, who are you, master? He said, I am Jesus, the one you're hunting down. And I want you to get up, enter the city. And enter the city, you'll be told what to do next. His companions stood there dumbstruck. They could hear the sound but couldn't see anyone. While Saul, picking himself up off the ground, found himself stone blind. They had to take him by the hand and lead him into Damascus. He continued blind for 3 days. He ate nothing and drank nothing. Now I want to stop here in this story just to give you some thoughts from this text from the Lord. Why would God have a man go without food and water? Not for 1 day. Not for 2 days, but for 3 days. But dear hearts, I really do believe that Saul was so shaken. He was shook up by the voice of Christ that he lost his appetite. And the thought of drinking water totally left his mind. Saul was literally scared straight to a point where he submitted to the voice of Christ. The man that he wanted to murder became the source of his hope. Christ himself, Oh, yes. Christ himself showed up to draw Saul into his life. For some people, their hearts, this one-on-one relationship is necessary, which means sometimes God has to interfere or interrupt our life with storms to bring us closer to him, to take us into what I call a deeper, more intimate relationship with him. And he'll do that for both the saint and the sinner, the believer and the non-believer. One of my favorite teachers said like this, that God blesses us and then he breaks us. He blesses you and then he breaks you. He allows storms to enter to your life that shatters what I call our sense of security. The storm slowly and surely draws you closer to the Lord as he puts your life back into order. Oh yes, he finds all the pieces, puts them back into order, but you will always find when he puts it back into order that it is better. Know this, that in some storms of life, the only safe way and the better way out is in God. The experience takes you to a new level of connection to the Lord. And this is what Saul needed. He needed to be shaken to a point where he continued his journey not without Christ, but with Christ in his heart. Yes, in storms of life, Christ finds space in our minds, in our hearts, in our souls, and in our spirits that we would not have given him if this situation had not occurred. And so let me take us further in the story of Saul on his road to Damascus and show you that God didn't stop here by shaking you up. Verse 10 of that same chapter, Acts chapter 9. So there was a disciple in Damascus by the name of Ananias. The master spoke to him in a vision. Ananias. Yes, master, he answered. Get up and go over to Straight Avenue. I'm going to stop here just to interject some thoughts. You see God's sense of humor in the location of Saul's arrival in Damascus. Straight Avenue, straight street. It signified Saul's location for getting his life changed from crooked to straight. Oh yes, crooked to straight. Saul was a mess, but God wanted him to have the best. And so God positioned him geographically, spiritually, physically in a place where his life could be changed. That's why, dear heart, sometimes we cannot be upset when God causes us to relocate from one city to the next, from one state to the next, from one country to the next. Oh yes. From one church to the next. Oh yes. From one job to the next. Oh yes. Sometime God will relocate you to relieve you of the current situation, to bring you to a new situation, in a better situation. And this is what God did for Saul. He sent him to a man that could bless him. Let me take us deeper into this story. This is what God said to Ananias concerning his relationship with Saul. He said, ask at the house of Judas for a man from Tarsus. His name is Saul. He's there praying. He had just had a dream in which he saw a man named Ananias enter the house and lay hands on him so he could see again. Let me stop here just to give you some thoughts on this text. It says, he told him what was happening in Saul's life and that he was going to be received. And the reception is the good news in Saul's story. God prepared somebody who could guide him back to normal, but on a better road. Listen to this. God sent Saul somebody who could guide him back to normal, but on a better road. And that road was a road of fellowship with Christ. Prior to this trip to Damascus, Paul had decided, he made a decision with all of his education. that Christ was not a part of Judaism, and he was not going to see something that he deeply believed in become changed by this man named Jesus. How dare he, this man, being raised in Nazareth? Paul hated Jesus. Saul at that time hated Jesus. But you know what? Saul found himself in the middle of God's plan to do a new thing. Let me say that again. Saul found himself in the middle of God's plan to do a new thing. A new thing in a place of traditional protocol. Dear hearts, God was going to use a man named Jesus, raised in Nazareth, to forever change the world. Saul did not want this. Saul, along with many others, wanted Jesus dead. And eventually Jesus was tortured and murdered for his message that he was the Son of God. I'm going to stop here at this point to ask all of us a question. I ask you this question. What is God asking you to do that is against the tradition of the community of believers that you live in? Saul found himself in the middle of God's plan to do a new thing. He knew for sure he was going to lose acceptance. But what is God asking you to do in the tradition of your community? Will you choose obedience to the Lord that may separate you from acceptance? Or will you choose to live a life of disobedience to God for acceptance? Paul was on a path of no return. He couldn't go back home. Accepting this man named Jesus? Oh no. But he made a good decision in a very difficult situation. In this text, you see that God will position you with a new place of acceptance when you make an unacceptable decision in a traditional situation. For Saul, this new place was with Ananias. God told Ananias to find Saul and pray for his sight to be restored. For you, it may be a new care group because of what God is telling you to do. A new family of believers. A new support system spiritually due to your attack from traditional people. The hearts God will give you people who see the potential inside of your life. They will see your gift to take them to the next season of their experience with God. They will give you what I call purpose and see the fire of conviction of something that they experience through you. Well, beloveds, I've got to go. God bless you. I hope to share again with you on next week.
This program was sponsored by Cynthia McIntosh. To hear this program again and others, go to FamilyValuesRadio1010.com and click on the podcast page and find this program and many others right there on FamilyValuesRadio1010.com.